Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Welcome back, adventurers. Today we are going to rank not the subclasses, but the apparitions for the Animist. And the reason I wanted to do this, even though it's not the subclass, is that a lot of your choice actually comes from which apparitions you want to go with. That even changes your playstyle, potentially. But before we can rank the apparitions, we first have to talk about what the apparitions give you, so we can set up our criteria for the ranking, because it is different than the subclass ranking is. Keep in mind that you are going to be able to choose 2 apparitions every day, right? You aren't stuck with them once you choose them. You get to change them every day that you're going to attune to. You get a 3rd starting at 7th level and a 4th at 15th level. So eventually you can have 4 apparitions at all times. So these aren't exclusive against each other, and the mixing and matching is actually really critical here. So what does an apparition grant you? Well, each attuned apparition is going to give you trained proficiency in 2 special lores. Now this will go up to expert if you're 8th level and master if you are 16th level. So it does go up. You're not just going to stick trained in these. They'll be valuable. Then you're going to get a vessel spell, which is a focus spell, which is available at level 1. But keep in mind that you only have access to the focus spell for your primary apparition. So I'm going to rank these assuming it's your primary apparition. All of the focus spells follow the same pattern, where they are 1 action to cast. They can be sustained up to a minute, with the exception of one of them. Then we get a cantrip, and 1 spell at each spell rank from levels 1 to 9. And we get a special avatar form, a form we turn into with the spell avatar. Granted, that will of course only come in helpful at level 19, so it doesn't really play a big part in these rankings, but they're fun to talk about. So let's go ahead and talk about what the ranking is going to look like. But before I actually show it on screen here, it's first good to know that yes, I'll be ranking from S to D like I normally do, but I've also scored all of the apparition spells. The scores will go from 1 to 4. However, I'm not going to show the scores for every spell or talk about every spell on here, except for, of course, the focus spells. I will get in detail on those, but all the other spells come off of various spell lists. And I did rank them all, and then what I did is I took an average. Because you're getting a cantrip and 9 spells, there's a total of 10, makes it really easy to find an average. And that average will play into my ranking as well. But I did score them from 1 to 4 each, and this will probably come into play more when I get to talking about spells. I just didn't want to get that deep right here. Apparitions are going to be ranked, like I said, against each other, assuming that they are your primary. So let's get the graphic up here and talk about how they're going to be ranked. S is an apparition that offers solid spells, landing with a high average from my ratings, mostly if not entirely from spell lists other than divine, because keep in mind, if we are getting divine spells, well, we could have taken those with our animist spell slots as well, so this is better if they're not on the divine list. The focus spell granted should be something you would want to use in most, if not all, encounters. The lores likely won't play a huge role in my rankings, but, you know, they could open up some interesting things, potentially. So keep that in mind. They open up feats, and they could be useful in certain campaigns. While the avatar forms are generally good, this should be a form that would almost always be one you'd want to pick. A is an apparition that offers mostly solid spells, landing with a high average for my rating, and there may be a few on the divine list, but they should be good divine spells. The focus spell granted should be something that you'd want to use, even if not always, but at least is a solid go-to on average. The avatar form should be good, and the lores might offer up a solid feat as well. B is an apparition that might have some spells granted that are on the divine list, and the focus spell granted is fine, but maybe won't be a regular go-to. It should have some standout spells it grants, but they don't all need to be standouts, and the form and the lores may not be anything special. At least they'll be situationally useful. The avatar form may not be your go-to, but at least it's an option. C is an apparition that hardly adds to your spell list, or the spells added are mostly situation or less likely to be used, often meaning it received a poor average rating from me. The focus spell doesn't hit the mark, so you likely won't ever really use it as your primary apparition, or at least very rarely. Even a good form can't really make it feel a whole lot stronger. And then there's D. These apparitions should just be avoided. It's hard to get value from the focus spell. The spells either aren't added much beyond the divine list, or the ones added are just terrible, and I just wouldn't expect to see apparitions land here. They are generally better than I think D is, but you never know, something might creep its way all the way down. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and jump into these apparitions. There are 13, so we have our work cut out for us. Let's dive in. Kicking off, like I normally do, alphabetically, although that will change up maybe a little bit. Anyway, Crafter in the Vault. The lore skills you get are Architecture and Engineering. You get the Vessel spell, Traveling Workshop. I ranked this a 2 out of 4. It's one action and sustained up to a minute as usual, or you can spend 10 minutes to cast it, and it lasts for 8 hours. The one action version, you become trained in crafting and thievery, and you get the associated tools. However, if this is being cast at a higher spell rank, so as you go up in level, you'll get higher versions of proficiency, so it will move up with you. You won't just always be trained. The 10-minute version, you create an entire workshop with everything you need to craft, do alchemy, all that stuff. It's going to be in there. And you still get the bonuses as well that you get for the one action version. So all that gets put together and somewhere to work. However, what you make here, you can't sell for income. There are 8 spells on the spell list here that are not on the divine list. However, my average star ranking from 1 to 4 for these spells is only 1.9, which is not good. That's the bottom of all of them. I believe that's the lowest I gave to anything. There are a few standout spells, both on the good and bad side. So on the bad side of things, Sigil, which I just don't find a lot of value to, and Knock, the way it's done here, just I don't love that spell either. I think it's fairly situational at best. On the good side, though, we've got things like Wall of Metal and Ferrous Form, which is a very solid defensive spell. Your avatar form is Incarnate Dungeon. It has a ground speed and a burrow speed and a fly speed of 50 feet, so lots of options there. The melee attack has a reach of 10 feet, versatile with bludgeoning and piercing, otherwise does slashing damage, and it's just 66 plus 6, but it does have grab on it too, which, for those of you who don't know, when an attack has grab on it, it means that if you hit with the melee strike, you can use your next action to grab, and there's no check or anything, you can just grapple with your next action. Then it has a ranged attack, 120 feet, which we'll see is very, very common. It has versatile poison, but it is 66 plus 6 piercing damage. So this isn't the strongest start we could have. The focus spell, honestly, it may never come up in an encounter. Needing to have crafting or thievery in the middle of an encounter is extremely situational. You might have to unlock under pressure, but boy, I mean, that is really unlikely. The bonus proficiencies are really odd to me too, because if you want to be good at crafting, for instance, you're just going to take crafting. You're not going to say, well, I better have this ready every day, and then when I use my focus spell, I'll be good at it. You just want to be good at it. So it seems really odd to me. I mean, at least the proficiency goes up with you, but I can't see myself thinking, ooh, I only want to be good at crafting or potentially thievery when I've got this spell active. That's weird. The lab is good, right? The lab is good for making stuff for you and for the party, but you can't sell it, but that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And again, though, the lab, being able to create that is amazing, but that means you're going to want to probably be good at these things other times too, so you don't have to wait on your focus spell to be able to make this lab. Maybe you just want to do it in your downtime without having to use your focus spell to constantly make it. It's just a weird combo here. Then we've got your spell list, and while mostly not on the divine spell list, which I think is good, they're just not very good on average. The strong spells are solid, but they come later on. So your best spells here are going to come later in the game. You may never even get to them, depending on where your game stops. And the early stuff is really rough, very situational, or just useless, honestly, in some cases. This is far from an ideal start, but sadly, this is an easy C for me. You might find a reason to have this as like a 4th apparition, possibly even a 3rd, maybe, but I wouldn't rely on it. Oh, and the reach of 10 feet I talked about for the melee strike in the avatar form is actually the lowest melee reach you can have with any of the avatar forms, so it sounded cool when I said it. It's really not. Grab is good, but the 10 feet is bad. Custodian of Groves and Gardens. This has farming and herbalism lore. You get the vessel spell Garden of Healing, which I would give a 5 to if I gave a 5, but it's going to get a 4 because that's the highest rank I give, but it deserves a 5. It's a 10-foot emanation. When you cast and when you sustain it, you heal everybody in that emanation for 1d4 hit points. Once the spell ends, anybody healed gets a +1 circumstance bonus to emotion saves for 10 minutes, but during which you can't heal again from this, and the healing increases by a d4 every spell rank. As far as spells that aren't on the divine list, this one's got the worst, where only 5 are not on the divine list, which sounds rough, but the average star ranking of all the spells that they have is 2.7, which is one of my highest. Yeah, that's a really solid list, even though it does include a lot of divine spells. As far as your standout spells go, we've got some pretty bad ones in things like Tanglevine and True Speech, but really good ones like Protector Tree, Field of Life, and Moment of Renewal. Your avatar form is Peaceful Reaches. It just has a ground speed of 60 feet. It ignores difficult and greater difficult terrain, however. Again, we've got a reach of 10 feet on the melee strike, has agile with trip and non-lethal, and does 66 plus 6 bludgeoning, and has grab. And then we've got a 120-foot ranged attack that also has non-lethal, which is 66 plus 6 mental damage. Immediately, we see a step up with the focus spell. While it doesn't seem amazing at first glance, maybe like, ooh, how am I going to keep people right around me in combat? And trust me, it can still be good in combat, but it becomes ridiculous out of combat. You sit down with your party around you for that 1 minute, keep in mind that's 10 rounds of this, and it's insane healing outside of combat. It's just a full restore for your party to where it's probably too good, honestly. Anyway, if you can get your party around you in combat, it can be good there too, but definitely out of combat, it is nutty. When we look at the spells granted, sadly only half are not on the divine list, but we do have really strong spells here with an average of 2.7 stars. It's stacked more later levels, just like we saw before, but we do have some nice hits early on, like we do have like with Protector Tree, for instance. Also, this might be the worst avatar form, as both attacks have non-lethal and low damage, and we still only have a 10 foot on the melee. I wouldn't want to use this avatar form very often. But there is a solid unarmed strike stance you can take thanks to having this lore, which is worth noting. So we will have these feats come up once in a while. This one's a really solid one for unarmed strikes. To me, this is clearly a step up from the last one, especially because the focus spell here is just S tier for me. And the spells being good, even if they aren't off the divine spell list, I have a hard time not giving this an A. And also partially because this is really the strongest team support apparition that we have. There aren't a lot that fill that role, because again, you are filling that role already with your Animist spellcasting, but this does more than that. And I really think this deserves an A, even though it doesn't fit all of my A criteria. It's pushed up there by some of what it does have. Echo in Lost Moments. This has fortune telling and genealogy lore. The vessel spell is Store Time. I gave this a 1 out of 4. When you cast and when you sustain this, you give up that action to gain an extra reaction for that round. That reaction can only be used for apparition reactions. Okay. This doesn't count for spell reactions as far as I can tell by reading this, but it might if they're on your apparition spell list. I'm iffy on that one. I'd love for you guys to weigh in, but that's not how I read it. Even if that was in there, it'd still be pretty terrible. You're giving up a guaranteed action that could do something interesting for a second reaction which you may not use. Then there are 8 spells that aren't on the divine spell list, so that's a good set. And the average star ranking I gave to these spells is 2.8, which is very, very high. The standout spells, well, there's only one really bad one, and that's Deja Vu. As far as good ones, though, we've got plenty, but the callouts I'm going to give are Phantasmal Calamity and Quandary, which is amazing. Your avatar form is Devourer of Lost Time. This has a ground speed of 30 feet and a fly speed of 50 feet. Its melee attack has a reach of 15 feet, which is actually kind of more the standard reach that we'll see, and has the Void trait because it does 6d10 plus 6 Void damage, which is the type of damage we want to see. And then it's got a ranged attack, which is 6d6 plus 6 Void damage. It's just an awful, awful focus spell here. It's a trap in my mind. I just don't think you should ever be using this. As I count them, there are 4 reactions this works with. 4. 1 is a level 6 feat, and 3 are level 12 feats. Even if spells count, there aren't that many on the spell lists worth using. And if you do pick up a reaction feat or spell, you probably won't even need more than 1 reaction per round to use them. I just don't see how valuable this could possibly be. So you're giving up guaranteed actions again to possibly get a reaction. A lot of times you're giving up an action to waste it. And that's about as big a trap as I can imagine. But thankfully, it's just a trap in the focus spell department. The rest is really solid. So again, we've got a spell list that only has 2 divine spells on it, and we have a really high ranking, 2.8. I think 2.9 is my max that I gave across any of the spell lists. So 2.8 is really high up there, and they feel solid. Again, we've got things on there that I think I would take no matter what if it was offered to me on any spell list. The avatar form is actually pretty decent here. Void damage is good unless you're fighting undead, so against other things, void is going to feel pretty good. Overall, I feel like this is a B. It's brought up by the spell list, absolutely, and it's brought down by the focus spell. So you could make it a primary apparition. I probably wouldn't, but I'd probably prepare it, or at least consider preparing it as one of my other apparitions because it's feeling solid. Imposter in Hidden Places has fortune-telling lore and underworld lore. It gives you the vessel spell Discomfiting Whisper. This is a 5-foot emanation. Oh, by the way, I ranked it a 2. It's a 5-foot emanation around you. Any creature starting its turn in that emanation must succeed a will save or roll twice on the first attack that round against you, taking the lower result. If the affected attacker does miss this, they're going to take a d6 void damage, and this does increase every 2 spell ranks, so they'll take a little void damage for missing. All 10 spells given here, none of them are on the divine list. They are all unique away from it, which is great. Unfortunately, I only gave it 2.1 stars because it's a pretty weak spell list. As far as your bad spells, you have things like Ill Omen, Veil of Privacy, and Strange Geometry. Again, all of these spells have their uses. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm considering these in combat and comparing them to other things at their level. They just don't hit nearly as hard. And on the good side, though, we have things like Phantasmagoria and Disappearance. The avatar form is Whisper Hiding in Shadows. This has a ground and fly speed of 50 feet, has a reach of 15 foot on its melee strike that deals cold damage or void damage that has versatile cold and does 6d10 plus 6 void damage. And then your range is 120 feet, has 6d6 plus 6 void damage. Okay, so far, the focus spells are either broken or pretty bad. This fits on the pretty bad end of things here. The focus spell affects creatures that start their turn next to you. Okay. So you just sat there on your turn and waited for them to start next to you again? That's not a good defensive choice. If you want to do a defensive thing, leave. Just, I don't know, at least step away? Make them waste an action to get up to you? Or just stride and get far away from them? As a defensive choice, it makes no sense why you would just sit there on your turn to guarantee they started their turn right next to you. That feels like a poor choice. Because, keep in mind, not only do they have to fail a will save for this to help you at all, then they have to miss their attack on 2 rolls. Not necessarily going to happen. And then great if they do. I mean, having that higher chance to miss is good, and then the void damage is, though, pretty unlikely, and it's not high anyway. So, it has its use. I'm not saying it doesn't. And if you're going to be up in melee and you're playing a Gish character, that's why I left it as a 2, not a 1. You might be up in creatures' faces because you want to be there, because you want to attack them. In this case, okay, it's fine. It's still not the best defensive melee aura, but it's okay. But moving on, all of the spells on the spell list not being divine is really, really nice. It's adding more versatility to our class, which I do like. Unfortunately, we have some real garbage in here. There is a reaction feat that requires one of the lores you have to help you stay invisible, which is fine, but it's not earth-shattering. So, I don't know. I don't know that I'd even take the feat, which is why it's not going to help a lot here. There is also a feat granting a 2-action strike, which is a great feat for a Gish. And the only thing about this form, though, that says Gish to me is it's defensive or around you, which isn't even a good one. Keep in mind, creatures at your level, even rolling dice twice, I mean, it still has like a 40% chance to hit you on average if you look across creatures of your level at most levels. So, And then finally we have the avatar form, which it's pretty average. It's not bad. I like that the melee form can give you void or cold damage to switch it up. But, I mean, that focus spell being so terrible, the spells on your spell list being bad, this is a C for me. I just don't think it's an easy take, and we have better Gish setups than this anyway. Lurker in Devouring Dark. This has ocean and sailing lore. You get Devouring Dark form, which I give a 3 to. When you cast or sustain this, you have 3 options. Well, eventually 3 options. At level 1, you just have the 1 option, which is you're going to gain a 1d8 bludgeoning, unarmed, 10-foot reach grapple attack. When you do cast this or sustain it, though, you can actually attempt to grapple a creature that's within that reach. which is pretty cool that you can just try to grapple as basically a free action. At higher levels, rather than getting that, you can instead take on a shark form or the form of a water elemental, using the stats from the form spell, of course. As far as spells, all 10 here, none of which is on the divine list. You have 2.6 average star rating on those spells for me. There's a couple on the weaker side, things like Grim Tendril and Grasp of the Deep, but then we have things like Wall of Ice and Arctic Rift that I think are actually pretty solid. Notice there's a cold and water theme going on here. Your avatar form is Tentacles from the Dark. You have a ground speed and a swim speed of 70 feet. You have a melee strike with a reach of 30 feet that has 6d10 plus 6 bludgeoning damage plus grab. And we talked about plus grab before. Plus grab is really good. A range of 30 feet on a melee strike is insane. Because of that, there is no ranged attack though. This is now the second of what I consider like the Gish Apparitions. The focus spell is about you going martial, part of the time at least. In this case, if you go with a solid strength score as your secondary ability score, and then you can of course build in athletics so that you can grapple really well at 10 feet away, and that's actually really a solid way to build your character. Still, it isn't universally good, hence the 3 instead of a 4 on that, and the other form options are just okay. The shark form's fine, the water elemental's fine. These aren't bad by any means, but they aren't blowing my mind. If you do have hand wraps of Mighty Blows, by the way, this will apply to your attack you gain, so do keep that in mind. Then we have the spells being none on the divine list, which is great, and we get a solid star ranking with them at 2.6. Even the worst spells could come up and actually be valuable. Like I would cast the ones I mentioned from time to time, so I don't think they're that bad. There's also a level 16 feat that you can take thanks to the Ocean Lore that adds more forms to the options for your focus spell and adds a new spell, monstrous form, to your apparition spell list, meaning you can just fully change into a monstrosity form, which is really good. All of this finishes off with an avatar form that, despite lacking a ranged attack, gives you a 30-foot grab melee strike, which is honestly fantastic. And if you're already building toward this kind of Gish thing you've got going on here, is insane. This is an A for me, and for those Gish players out there, but keep in mind, it's all about the unarmed strike, so if you're not going to go Gish, this is going to feel a little weird. But considering how much of Animist is kind of built to work that way, I would certainly think about it. Monarch of the Fey Court. This has art and Fey lore. The vessel spell is Nymph's Grace, which I gave a 4 to. This is a 10-foot emanation. Any creature starting its turn in the emanation or that enters it the first time on a round must succeed at a save or be confused for the round, and it cannot target you with its hostile actions while it's confused in this way. There are 8 spells in its spell list that are not on the divine list. The average star rating, sadly, is 2.1. Again, you've got some on the bad side, like Tanglevine, Create Food, and Enthrall, none of which I think are fantastic. But you have Hallucination and Mask of Terror, which are pretty solid, in fact, very good in my mind. You've got the avatar form of Queen of the Winter Court. This gives you a ground and swim speed and a fly speed of 50 feet. Your melee strike is a 15-foot reach with agile, and it does 60-10 plus 6 mental damage. And your range is 120 foot with the mental trait versatile and versatile cold traits that does 66 plus 6 mental damage. All right, so now that's how you make a defensive aura around yourself. Creatures don't have to start there. If they rush up to you, they still have to make the save. If they fail the save, they are confused. Confusion is bad. It's really bad. You don't want to be confused. They could end up striking their allies, and they can't target you with anything hostile while they're confused. This is a fantastic defensive buff for yourself. It is so strong, and it actually is something you might want to have going if you're going to play a kind of Gish style, but even if you're not, if you're playing a ranged character, you're trying to stay away from them, eventually they're going to get up to you, and this time you might just be able to laugh at them as they do, as they then trail off in confusion and run toward an ally. Really solid defensively. Then we have the fact that, most of our spells aren't on the divine list, which is great. They aren't the best spells, though, sadly. I think that the fact that they don't have like some great early spells I think are solid does really hurt it. There is a stance that you can take at level 16 thanks to your Fey lore, which lets you ignore difficult terrain and gain resistance to damage from certain types of creatures. So it's situational at best, but it's something you might consider if you are in that kind of campaign. The avatar form is nicely versatile, and I consider it kind of above average for an avatar form. Altogether, though, this still feels like a B. Simply one of the best vessel spells out there. I just wish the spell list didn't let it down. And if you get up high enough level, it's really got a good avatar form. So it teetered on the edge for me, but it's really lifted up by the focus spell and let down by the spell list. Then we have Reveler in Lost Glee. This has circus lore and fortune telling lore. You get Trickster's Mirrors, which I also gave a 4 to. You gain a mirror, and you can gain up to 3 over time. Every time you sustain, it'll add 1. They potentially take hits for you, depending on the number of mirrors and the dice rolled. There's a lot of mechanics going on here, but essentially, if you are targeted by an attack, and if it would hit you, then you roll dice to see if it instead hits a mirror. And if it does, the mirror breaks, and you get a new mirror up, of course, the next time. And if nobody breaks down your mirrors, you're getting up to 3, which improves the chance of it hitting a mirror instead of you. If an attack does come your way, though, and it misses you, it will still hit the mirror and break it. If a melee attacker breaks the mirror, so that to be right up next to you within 5 feet, they actually take mental damage, which is just a d4, but it increases every spell rank, so they're going to make mental damage for hitting a mirror instead of you. There are 8 spells here that are not on the divine spell list. I gave a 2.9 star rating to the spells here, which is the highest I gave to anything. So they have a fantastic spell list. We've got some standout spells as far as on the bad side. And again, I put them here because they're on the lower end, but I don't consider them bad. Prestidigitation and Hypnotize, maybe they aren't as good as the other things on this list, but they're still good to have. And then we've got really solid ones in Confusion and Quandary again. Your avatar form is Ringmaster of the Dark Celebration. This has a ground speed of 50 feet, but it ignores difficult and greater difficult terrain. Your melee has a 15-foot reach, and trip does 6d10 plus 6 slashing damage. And your range is 120 feet, has acid trait and versatile void, and does 66 plus 6 acid damage. So this is another great defensive spell. Granted, with a different angle on it, but another one that's really solid. Doesn't require a failure on a saving throw from your enemies, which is nice, and attacks that would otherwise hit you can still in fact not hit you. All of that's really good. It also helps you against melee and ranged attacks, which I think is really nice here. Now, it's easy to run out of mirrors if you're getting targeted at all, but if you're not getting targeted for a couple rounds, you're going to build them up. Anyway, the sustain here is going to feel well worth it as it builds up your mirrors. This time, our spell list hits really hard with the 8 non-divine spells, and we are definitely stronger than average, right? This is a solid list. This is a really good controller. The spells lean into that control playstyle. There is a feat, the same feat that our last apparition had, in fact, and again, it's fine, but it's situational, right? So it is available to us thanks to our lores. We do have a slightly less mobile avatar form here, but at least ignoring greater difficult and difficult terrain is helpful. All that put together, though, with how good the spell list is, how good our vessel spell is, this is definitely an A, and is, in my mind, the standout controller in the set. Then we have Stalker in Darkened Boughs. We have Hunting and Forest lore here. We get Darkened Forest form, which I gave a 3 to. You take a Pest form. This is at level 1 by default. Using the rank of the focus spell, and that gives you the options of what you can turn into. Starting at rank 2, which is at level 3, you can use Animal form instead, or you can keep using Pest form. And then at rank 5, you can use Elemental form. So they're going to keep going up depending on what spell level you're able to cast this at. And you can choose what form you want to take every single turn, every time you sustain. So you can keep changing forms constantly, which is actually really good. There are 9 spells that are not on the divine spell list here, but we only have a star ranking of 2.1. We've talked about that, is not good. On the negative side of our spells, we've got things like Bestial Curse, Moon Frenzy, and Unfettered Pack. But on the better side, we have Vomit Swarm and Wall of Thorns, which I do really like. The avatar form is Beast of the Boughs. This has a ground and flying speed of 70 feet. It also has a melee attack with reach of 15 feet, deadly 3d10, and does 66 plus 6 piercing damage, but there is no ranged strike on this one. So this is our third kind of Gish apparition. I don't like it quite as much as I like the tentacle one we got earlier, but I do like it more than the first one we had. These can still be great. The forms you get with your focus spell can still be great, and changing every round is actually really interesting. Most of the added spells aren't divine, which is great, but we've got some real sinkers in the mix. I don't love our list really here at all. There are a massive 5 feats, though, that interact with this apparition. Several of these are solid and I would consider them. Then we have the very mobile avatar form, which granted only has a melee strike, but man, you can really get somewhere with it. I still don't think it's amazing though. In fact, I'd say it's below average. Even though it's got the deadly 3d10, you're probably not going to be critting enough for that to be a huge deal. And you don't have the kind of range we got with our last Gish with the 30-foot grab, which is much stronger in my mind. All that said, it's not really an A territory. I think it's a B. You've got a lot of things that can come together well and are nice here. Really what pushes up to B, though, and keeps it solid there is how many feats are available to you, and I think there are plenty that will feel good. Then we have Steward of Stone and Fire. This has mountain and volcano lore. You get Earth's Bile, which I gave a 2. This is a 10-foot burst within 30 feet, and anything in there has to make a basic reflex save. This deals 1d4 bludgeoning and 1d4 fire and 1 persistent fire damage, although there's no persistent fire damage on a save, so it's not like half on a save for that part. This increases by 1d4 for each type of damage and 1 persistent fire damage every 2 spell ranks. There are 10 spells here that aren't on the divine list. Yep, this is a fully new set, and I gave them a 2.9, the highest rank I give. On the bad side, we have things like Petrify and Earthquake. Both have use, but they're just not amazing. On the good side, we've got things like Fireball, Wall of Fire, and Wall of Stone, all of which are really good. Avatar form, we've got Blood of Planets. This has a ground and burrow speed of 50 feet that ignores difficult and greater difficult terrain. Reach of 15 feet, versatile bludgeoning, but does 6d10 plus 6 fire damage. And then we've got the ranged 120-foot fire damage strike, 6d6 plus 6 fire damage. So we've talked about good Gish setups, good controllers, even one good support. This is an AoE apparition. That is what you're doing here. Sadly, the focus spell is, in my opinion, on the weaker side. It's not bad. Being able to focus, being able to target a different 10-foot burst every single time you sustain is really nice. Unfortunately, 30 feet's just not that far. And this isn't like a Gish style where you want to be up next to creatures necessarily. It's just, you know, you want to keep your distance. 30 feet's kind of short. Also, the heightening is pretty terrible. That's pretty low damage. Still, it has a place, and you might want to use it here and there. I just don't know that you'd always be using this spell. The spell list, though, is fantastic for blasting, as even some of the control built in there too, but blasting is really what it's all about. And considering that there aren't a whole lot of blasters, you might really want to think about it, because even if it's not your primary apparition, you still could be, because you might still want its AoE, but given the amount of AoE it does, it's nice to have as a set of spells you can pull from. Then there are 2 feats tied to it. The level 6 reaction that's available is really a solid choice. So I would take a good look at that one. It would feel really good, I think, on most builds. As for the avatar form, I would say it's pretty average. Watch out for fire resistance, obviously, because the range is only fire resistance, and you can switch it up, thankfully, for the melee. But if you're looking for an AoE option, this has to be your place to start. Yes, the focus spell isn't as good, but it's not bad. It's just not as good. The rest of the package is really solid, so I'm going to give this an A, hovering just above a B. Still, never hurts to be able to wipe out all of the minions on the board quickly. Then we have Vanguard of Roaring Waters. This has mountain and river lore. You get River Carving Mountain, which I give a 4 to. When you cast it and sustain it, you have a 10-foot increase to your speed. This is a status bonus. And you gain lesser cover to ranged attacks, which is +1 AC. When you cast and sustain it, you stride up to your speed, and you leave behind yourself a trail of difficult terrain in your wake. There are 9 spells here that are not divine spells, and I gave the Everstar ranking here of 2.5, which is in the middle. It's okay. As far as standout spells, on the lesser side, we have things like Control Water and Dancing Fountain. On the stronger side, with things like Crashing Wave and Whirlpool. The avatar form is River that Splits the World. This has a ground speed of 50 feet and a swim speed of 70 feet. With a reach of 15 feet, the melee strike has versatile slashing, has the water trait, and does 60-10 plus 6 bludgeoning. And the ranged is 120 feet, as usual, with versatile piercing, the water trait, and 66 plus 6 bludgeoning damage. This kind of lives in between like an AoE and control in many ways, but the focus spell does neither, but that doesn't make it bad. In fact, the focus spell is really, really solid here. One of the big problems the Animist is going to have is movement. Because you're wanting to use a focus spell for 1 action and then cast full-on spells, usually, for 2 actions, you don't have any space for movement. not only do you get movement with your focus spell, you get to move farther than usual, which is going to make it really hard for enemies to keep up, and you leave difficult terrain behind yourself, could make it impossible for them to keep up, and you have a bonus to your defenses against ranged strikes. Really, that's a whole lot coming together. That's why I love it. I think this is a great defensive and positioning feat, and it just gets you moving around the battlefield, which is always a good thing. The list here is mostly primal, but doesn't get the best primal spells. It gets kind of middle of the road here, so that's not bad. It's just not amazing. It does have access to some of the same feats that the last apparition did, which also helps with movement, which is good. So I think they're okay choices to take. And then the Avatar one, I don't think the Avatar is anything special unless you're in a water campaign. Putting all that together, again, really solid focus spell. Some good but not amazing spells. Nothing really blows me away on the spell list, but nothing's terrible. Kind of a mid Avatar form. This is B, and I say it's B because it'll really work out well in certain campaigns, and we've got some things here we like. I might be tempted to make it my primary because I really like the defensive and the movement side of things, but it would really depend on what else I'm trying to do with myself as a caster. But I do like it, so I think it's a solid B. Then we have Witness to Ancient Battles. This has Battlegrounds and Heraldry lore. You get Embodiment of Battle, which I gave a 4 to. You gain martial weapon proficiency equal to your simple weapon proficiency, and you get a +1 bonus, status bonus, I should say, to your attack and damage rolls. You also gain Reactive Strike when this is active. Now, you do have a -2 penalty to your spell attack rolls and spell save DCs while this is being sustained, but you get a status bonus of +2 instead of +1 at 7th level, and a +3 instead of +1 at 13th level. So some solid bonuses. There are only 6 spells here that aren't on the Divine list, but our overall ranking for the list is 2.7 stars. We do have some bad spells here. Ghostly Weapon, considering a rune can just make it worthless, and Invoke Spirits I don't like, but things like True Strike and True Target for a Gish setup, which this is, are really strong. Then you get the Avatar form of General of Endless Battle. This has a ground speed of 70 feet, and you are immune to Immobilized while you have it. You have a reach of 15 feet with your melee strike that has the Fatal D12 trait and the Agile trait, and does 68 +6 slashing. This is our weapon Gish. So we've done some unarmed Gish, now we in the weapon Gish vein of things. You can still use unarmed strikes. They still gain the bonus from the focus spell, so it's not just martial weapons. Just martial weapons are often better than the unarmed strikes you'll otherwise have access to. The focus spell itself makes you a solid melee combatant early on, especially having reactive strike in here, which is a huge bonus for it. The boost to hit helps you keep up slightly with martials as well, but not completely. You will fall behind because your proficiency with weapons will lag. You'll still eventually get up to where most martials do, having this and having a bonus to it, but you won't keep up as well as I'd like. You will have to take a hit to your DC and spell attacks like we talked about, but that can be okay if you're going with, say, support spells, because they don't care what your DC is or your spell attack, so it's kind of make sure you're set up well to use them. As far as the spell list, we've got 6 that aren't on the Divine spell list here, but they're solid, having a nice 2.7, and we get some really good ones early on, which some of the spell lists have had trouble with. Most are only good assuming you're going to play this Gish or Spell Sword style, though. The lores open up 2 feats for you, both at level 6, and both are pretty solid feats. It'd be hard to say which one I'd want to go with first, again, assuming I'm going to play a Gish style. And that's a huge win, having 2 really solid feats. Then we have the Avatar form, and let's be honest about it, it's not good. You have melee only, which, okay, we had that before, but the melee only before, one of those melee only before avatars had an insane movement speed, and the other one had a 30-foot reach. This is a 15-foot reach, which is fine, but Fatal D12, so as a reminder, it turns all of your dice from whatever they were to D12s, and it's going to add 1 on top when you crit, right? This is when you crit, right? Adds 1 on top. The problem is you're sacrificing your average strike D10s for D8s to maybe hit slightly harder on a crit. And I just don't think that's going to play in your favor on average. I think you're going to hit more often than you're going to crit. So overall, I think this is worse than a lot of the other ones. Even so, I think that the spell we get here, well, the focus spell, is amazing for all of our Gish playstyles. I think that there's some good spells in here, but nothing that's going to blow you away. This isn't overly solid. I think I'm going to give this a B. I like it. This is a very fun setup that I think I would play, but I do think it's a B. I don't think it hits as hard as some of the other choices we've seen before. Also, keep in mind, I've been talking about, oh, this one's a Gish style, which I know I don't talk about. I assume everybody knows what I mean when I say Gish. Maybe you don't. It just means that spell sword that, I'm a marshal. I get up in martial and fight, but I'm also a spellcaster. That's what I mean by that. The Animist is well set up for that. But I talk about these different styles. We've got, hey, this one's more of a Gish apparition. This is an AoE. This is a controller. This is support. When I talk about all that, that doesn't mean, hey, there's 3 here that are all, Gish apparitions. Take them all. No. Generally, you're going to want variety. So when you're taking them, I probably only take 1 Gish, honestly, at a time. Maybe you take 2, but I would caution you not to stack them too much. The last 2 here that we're talking about are actually not in alphabetical order, or, well, they are with each other, but not with our last ones. Anyway, these are here at the end because they actually were added later on, right, by a different book, but I still want to include them here. So, Shepherd of Errant Winds. This has sailing and scouting lore. You get the vessel spell Gift of the Animos, which I gave a 4 to. This has a 10-foot emanation. A creature inside that critically fails an attack against you must make a reflex save or be off guard until the end of your next turn. When you cast or sustain this, you can step, jump 10 feet in any direction, or shove a creature using your spell attack rather than athletics. All those are pretty cool. There are 9 spells here that aren't on the divine list. I gave an average of 2.7 stars to the rating for these spells. You have some things that aren't as good, like Propulsive Breeze and Vacuum, but then we've got solid stuff like Slashing Gust, Tailwind, and Scouting Eye. As far as your avatar form, you get Will of the Winds. It's a ground speed of 40 feet, but a flying speed of 70 feet. It ignores difficult and greater difficult terrain, which includes flying difficult and greater difficult terrain, by the way. You have a reach of 20 feet on your melee strike rather than 15. It has the air trait. It does 6d8 plus 6 bludgeoning damage. And then you've got a range strike of 120 feet, has versatile sonic and electricity traits because it does 66 plus 3 electricity. Here we finally find another AoE apparition. This is only our second one, really. Well, you could kind of argue Crafter in the Vault had some AoE stuff, but anyway, this is the other true one, even though its focus spell is not about that, right? At first read, I was kind of disappointed by the focus spell. The creature not only has to crit fail a melee attack against you, but then it also has to fail a reflex save to become off guard, and that's not good. But the real value of it comes with the second part. The third part? Whatever. The free movement is actually great, or shove, of course. Stepping is already really solid. Gets you away from somebody, means that you can cast unhindered. Fantastic. Then we got the ability to shove using our spell attack roll. Can be fantastic as well, especially if we're not making any attack rolls with the rest of our turn. And jumping is actually really good too, because you can actually get onto higher places because you had this one action you were using and you're sustaining, and it still has the chance to be defensive for you. So overall, I really like it as a spell. The spell list here is mostly not on the divine list, which is great, and they're pretty solid on average with some real standouts. Even the avatar form is interesting with its range attack at least, because you've got electricity and sonic here. Not sure why it's only a +3 on the damage rather than a +6 we got with all of the previous apparitions, but I'm not going to worry about 3 damage at 19th level, so okay. Either way, I think this is a solid B. I think it borders between A and B, but when I look between this and Steward of Stone and Flame, I think that one's much stronger, honestly. So I think this one is a B, but it's definitely a high B. And finally, Speaker in Sibilance. This has the Mountain and Fortune-Telling Lores. You get Crown of the Prophets, which I gave 2 stars to as a vessel spell. You gain a D6 Piercing, Agile, Finesse, Versatile Poison, Unarmed Strike. And when you cast or sustain this, you can either recall knowledge with the dubious knowledge feat as an action, as a free action, sorry. Or if a creature is within 15 feet of you and it damaged you since your last turn, you can spit 2d4 poison damage with a basic fortitude save at it, which increases every spell level by 1d4. None of the spells here are on the divine list, but the average star rating I gave is 2.1. We've got some here that I hate, like Ill Omen and Slither, and some really good ones like Mask of Terror and Unfathomable Song, but those are much later. Then you get the avatar form, which is Medusa of Merciless Mysteries, which has a ground speed and a climbing speed of 60 feet. The melee attack has 15-foot reach to it and has the poison trait. does 66 plus 6 piercing damage and 2d6 persistent poison damage. Your ranged is 120 feet. Versatile sonic, does mental damage, does 66 plus 3 mental damage. I'm not quite sure what direction they were taking this one. We have some attack pieces like Gish style, some control, and some support via like knowledge from the focus spell. The focus spell itself seems confused, being 3 things all at once. I considered it a 2 mostly for the recall knowledge, otherwise I probably would have given it a 1. But honestly, that might be generous. One glaring issue is that the apparition is built around poison damage, and it is the worst damage type. I will be doing a video eventually about different damage types, but trust me, it's bad. This hurts the focus spell and the avatar form in general, honestly. This is part of why the average is 2.1, which is bad, despite not being from the divine list. There are feats that are opened up thanks to the lores, which does absolutely help this. So don't get me wrong, like that's actually going to boost this up. The avatar form also isn't that bad because the range strike can do mental or sonic, but I don't like the melee strike here very much at all. This is a C to me. And honestly, I almost consider it a D because I just don't like how the parts of it come together. But I do feel like there's enough pieces you can pull together that it could feel fine. But it's just not something I would lean into normally, and it's got to be the worst of the apparitions in my mind. And there you have it. All the apparitions ranked. As you can see, we didn't have any that were like crazy over the top powerful. We just lived between A and C, although I know one got really close there. And we don't have that many C's. So overall, I think we have some really good apparitions. What do you think? Are my rankings way off the mark? Is Speaker and Sibilance S tier in your mind? Maybe you can't stand any of the Gish apparitions? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, adventure on.